item would be adoption of the agenda. We do have one late item for additions regarding the Comox Valley Regional District OCP bylaw referral. So with that, we'll deal with under, we suggest, what, staff reports? Yes, 4C. Like that.
I'll move that with the addition.
Thank you.
Second.
All in favor? Motion's carried. Two delegations this afternoon. First of all, let us welcome Officer in Charge of the USMP, Tim Walton. Welcome, Inspector, to Comox and Comox Valley and to our council chambers. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much. About 100 days ago, I became your police chief. And since that time, my family and I have settled in well here in Comox, but I mentioned to you earlier, I'm still looking for help organizing my garage. I'm very proud to lead the 90 or so employees at the detachment, helping the residents of Comox make our town a safe place to live. Because Comox is a safe community. We continue to work with you, the residents, and our community partners to lower the crime rate again this year. We continue to monitor our priority offenders. Some have sought treatment, some have gone back to jail, and others have moved to different other communities. We've also increased our efforts to dissuade drivers from having handheld devices while behind the wheel. Well, not everybody has decided to leave the phone alone. Collisions are down from last year as well. And on those quality of life issues, graffiti is down from last year, and we continue to devote our resources to the hotspots here in the valley. I provided you with our second quarter annual performance plans, our priorities, as well as the crime stats year to date this year to last year. As I said a couple seconds ago, crime is down, and as well as the reported calls we attend are down from last year. So it's continuing to trend, and there's nothing unusual when you compare this to other communities. And that is my report.
All right. Great, thanks. Any questions from members of the council for Inspector Walton? We love hearing that good news.
Yeah, great.
Thank you, and again, welcome to Comox.
Thank you.
All right, our second delegation is Mr. Jim Dumont, here to talk to us about the Phase 2 Northeast Comox Neighborhood Stormwater Management Plan. Welcome, Mr. Dumont.
Thank you. Nice to be here to talk about this rainy afternoon. So what we're here to talk about is just a background to give you an update of where we're sitting at today. So the outline of what we're going to talk about today is a bit of background, where, what, why, the integrated stormwater management plan process, review the results of stage 1 very, very quickly. And the reason we're here is to present the stage 2 findings, which involves changing the development process, and the other key item is the additional town resources that are going to be required. And finally, we'll look into what we're going forward in the stage 3, the final stage of the work program. So, to put it into context, we'll just have a quick look at the within the OCP, the land use and land holdings. So the study area is northeast Comox. There's a mixture of residential and light industrial. Within that area is the intended land use. The land holdings include private holdings, 19 wing, our CAF Association, provincial, and the Airport Commission. So a mixture of ownership and land use potentials. So the objectives of the stormwater management, there's quite a number of them as we were going through the process. I think everybody knew what they were, but it's nice to actually put them on paper. And these are the big points that we decided were important, and we hope you agree that we want to allow for the fulfillment of the OCP. We want to manage the risks for the town, manage the top costs for the town. We don't want to increase the level of risk to properties and people. We want to protect those people and property from any increases in flooding. That was very brought up very vocally at the public meetings we had. We Also brought out was we want to maintain the irrigation supply in the summers and maintain or improve the aquatic fish habitat. So those are the objectives of what we're trying to achieve with that development. Thank you. So one thing to keep in mind is the Northeast Comox. The study area is just a small part of the overall watershed that's contributing to the Queen's Ditch. And while we can solve the problems within the study area, we can't solve the problems within the watershed, primarily because a lot of the watershed area isn't within the town of Comox. So our whole study is aimed at solving and providing the town with a solution to manage the impacts within the town itself. So the purpose of the ISMP is to identify and quantify the risks and costs, identify how we're going to manage those, and then we divided the process into 3 parts. Stage 1, which was completed previously, really identified what do we have. Stage 2 is what we're reporting today, is what do we want, and stage 3 is where we're going, is how are we going to get there. So trying to keep it simple and state the obvious here. So stage 1, it established the pre-development site conditions, the hydrology. We did an extensive literature review, a compilation of a lot of available data. There was a lot of additional investigations completed and an evaluation of the existing drainage system. So that was sort of a what do we have tied up in a nice little report. Stage 2, which is where we're going to tonight. The work program involved developing the post-development unmitigated flow regime and volumes, the rates and volumes, and options to mitigate the increases. Keeping in mind the objectives to have no additional flooding, maintain the summer irrigation supply, and to maintain or enhance the fish habitat. In the report, there were a number of best management practices, structural, actually constructed infrastructure that were identified as potential that could be used in the area. We also identified any legal and administrative issues that would need to be addressed before we could implement. And we also identified the need for some additional town resources and some bylaws to allow this all to happen. So the conclusions to date have been, I think, fairly simple, that the traditional pipe and pond stormwater systems that had been designed up until now would not be adequate to protect to meet the objectives of the town for the development in this area. The increased volumes of runoff, even if we did control the rates, would get down in Queen's Ditch. Queen's Ditch has a limited discharge capability to the ocean. So with a traditional stormwater pipe and pond system, we'd be increasing the flooding. So we had to develop a different system. And what we found is that it is technically feasible and possible to mitigate those impacts. But what we need is a new approach, some new design standards, and new bylaws and administrative processes to allow that to happen, and a little bit of town resource to move things along as well. So I think we're identifying things, the risks and opportunities as we're going along. So we're identifying the need to change the development process. Whereas previously the subdivision and the water, municipal water, sewer, drainage, and the roads were all installed as part of the subdivision process by the developer on lands that were then transferred to the town. After that, house construction happened on private properties. we're just pretty straight ahead. In the future, though, what we see is there's going to be some additional stormwater management infrastructure. Some of it may be installed by the developer within the municipal dedication. Some of it may be installed by the house builder. So we haven't established that split yet, but going forward, we see that there's a possibility of going one way or both, or the other way. One thing that has been identified as being critical is that erosion from the construction sites be absolutely controlled, because these stormwater infrastructure, primarily retention and infiltration systems, are very sensitive to erosion and sediment wash off. They get plugged up, so we don't want them to fail. In following construction and the maintenance periods, the town will maintain the systems on the municipal land. That's a given. And it's also expected that if these systems are on private property, that the homeowner will maintain them. Now, this is part of the question that we have to wrestle with going forward: is do we actually make that split or not? So, town resources, I mentioned we needed some town resources. We needed a couple of new bylaws, or one new bylaw, which is an erosion and sediment control bylaw, and we need a revision to the subdivision servicing bylaw. We need some staff training for the operation and maintenance of these new facilities and infrastructure. We need to have the staff undertake the review of the designs, verification of the installation of the systems. And there's likely to be new development agreements and acceptance procedures for the new infrastructure. So there's new resources for bylaw enforcement. If we have a new bylaw, we'll have to enforce it in some way. And there's operation and maintenance of these new infrastructure facilities will have to be provided. So it's going to cost a little bit more to develop without the impacts. Next step, going into stage 3, what we're going to do is do an evaluation of the BMP types. We're going to identify the factors that would be pro and con, beneficial and detrimental, including cost, as part of the evaluation process, so we can choose and recommend which BMPs should be applied. We're going to create a plan that locates which BMPs are going to be appropriate and where they'd be appropriate, based on the physical conditions of the sites, the operating characteristics, and I might add also the ownership. We're going to establish design criteria and the details to be used for construction of these, so that they're standardized. And the final, which I think is very important, is we're going to create an adaptive management plan. And what that does is going to specify some monitoring, so that we can ensure that the plan is actually implemented, the plan is actually working. We're going to identify any risks and potential failures, how to identify them as part of the monitoring program, and what to do if we identify a failure. So this is going to be a key element of that plan. So that's where we're going within stage 3. That would be next. Yeah, that ends my discussion, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions from members of council? Councilor Price.
I just had 2 or 3 questions. The homeowner managed elements, so it's a little bit of a worrisome thing. Are there any track records of areas that have done this, and whether it is successful to rely on individuals to actually keep these systems running?
We've built quite a number of these in the city of Surrey and Township of Langley over the last 15 years. What we lacked there was a bit of monitoring. Some of them were monitored initially as demonstration or pilot projects. The monitoring came back with good results, but the monitoring program stopped, so we didn't get any, the result, we don't know how they lasted after that. In other areas, outside of the lower mainland or low west coast, there have been long-term studies on, with some really good successes and some not so good successes, but we've identified the causes of the failure. So we've learned as we were going ahead, and some of them, that if we can take that learning that we've had, we can do a good job here.
And so if we did find failure of private residences to carry out this work, is there remedial action? Are there choices we can make after that if it doesn't work, or are we stuck with trying to enforce people to do what's not working?
Well, that will be part of the adaptive management plan. We'll need to identify that risk and identify some options for managing it and for either creating fixes, maintenance, or new facilities. So we'll be looking at that in much more detail going ahead at stage 3.
And I noticed in your report too, you had just a little section on climate change, and it sounded like there wasn't agreement within the group as to how to factor in that impact. And just yesterday was such a classic case of what, in all likelihood, we can expect on an increasing level of one storm after another.
Climate change itself is not something that I'm going to say that there's perfect agreement on. We looked at the climate change models, and there's a lot of different models that are widely used. And what we as a group decided was to use the model that provided the median change. So somebody might argue we should have a higher change or lower change. We thought we don't know enough about it, so we're relying on the climate change experts to tell us what to do. And so we felt it was prudent to use the median change that's been projected, and that's what we've applied in the model.
And I know Queen's Ditch is the main waterway that will be affected. Will there be any impact on the northeast towards Glasgow Marsh? Is there drainage for it?
No, that's part of the same protection. It's not just Queen's Ditch, it's the entire watershed that we can protect. If we're causing an impact, any impacts that are resulting from that study area will be mitigated, so we're not affecting the rest of the watershed.
Okay, and just lastly, just on that whole question of liability for flooding, it does occur, as you're probably aware, there was a great big law case many years ago to do with Queen's Ditch, which cost millions. So I'm guessing the town would be liable, or would your company take that liability?
What we would be able to show is that we and the town we're using the latest scientific knowledge, the latest tools of assessment and mitigation, and that it would be much more likely that the problems were caused by somebody else.
So that should help with our
Oh yes, it should help because we have the analysis to back up our recommendations. Yes.
Thank you. Good presentation.
Councillor Sawyer.
Jim, do you have any idea of a timeline for phase 3?
I don't. We might be able to ask Marvin. Could you answer that, Marvin?
I believe some work has already started on phase 3. And if there's permission, we could just ask Paul if he's doing the work.
We're actually working backwards from when we need the information. So the intent is to have subdivision designs and to be able to start looking at doing some work in Northeast Comox, physical work next spring for summer construction. So working backwards from there, we're hoping that the phase 3 report is going to be prepared in draft this year, and it's going to be approved. There's always some back and forth with the town, the staff, and the lawyers to make sure that the language is appropriate. That takes a little bit of time, but the intent is to have everything complete by early 2015.
Thank you.
Any questions? Just on the additional town resources, you've identified there some of it's obviously staff resources to draft bylaws and so on. In your experience in dealing with other communities, the monitoring, the enforcement, the labor, I guess, training and so on, how is that usually funded? Is it funded out of general revenues or is it specific to like a local service area?
There's a number of ways that that's managed. If it's identifiable to and specific to a development or a project, sometimes those costs are borne by that development or service area. If it's a more general, say bylaw for erosion sediment control, that would be applicable more generally to the entire town. So that might be a factor that would push it into general revenues. Some of the future tasks might be really related to construction activities, which we know where those charges go from. So as we move forward in stage 3, the consultant will be doing that part of the study. What we've recommended is that the staff look at the resources and identify and quantify those, and not only quantify how much, how many people, what resources are required, and where the funding is going to come from. So I don't have the answer tonight, but I expect that will be developed over the next couple of months.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Councillor Conway.
Just following up on that, the additional staff resources needed, I would imagine that's when the whole area is built out, wouldn't it? I mean, we've got some proponents here tonight. I don't think that their portion, which is just a small part of the entire area that you're studying, we're not going to need extra staff on just to monitor that small little portion of the plan, would we?
As I said, I don't have that answer tonight. We need to look at, staff to look at what resources do they really need to accommodate that, and identify, is there actually a staffing position, is there some contracting, what are the funding mechanisms, so many people. I don't have that answer tonight.
It's just that when I looked at your study, you weren't just, you're doing a much broader study than the 99 lots or whatever it is that the proponents have before us.
Well, we're looking at just that study area, but these principles can be applied across the town.
All right, thank you, Mr. Dumont, for your presentation. Council, further questions? We do have under correspondence phase 2 report. So it's probably appropriate at this juncture to receive that report. When you see any discussion, all in favor, motion's carried. And then the recommendation is that phase 3 component be initiated and in parallel the town initiate regulatory and administrative aspects necessary for implementation of the new stormwater management standards. So we can move that if you wish.
I'll move that.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion's carried. All right, so that will move us to staff reports. And Councilor Conway.
I'm going to declare a conflict on this and I'll leave the room.
And I do believe our planner has a presentation. That is doing on time.
He's getting over movies at the theaters.
Thanks, Mark. No problem. I thought you were interested in that.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
So, just wanted to give a little background and an update in regards to the planning project and looking at the light industrial zone and expanding permitted uses in that zone. So the presentation, let's go through, go introduction, subject property, zoning context, official community plan context, discussion, planning procedures. In other words, why we are doing this, where we're at, and where we're going. So it all started with a letter from the owners of the Guthrie Trade Center in terms of requesting an expansion of permitted uses in the light industrial zone going more to a commercial designation. There were specific uses mentioned. When we took a look at that letter, there were a number of properties that were, from a regulatory perspective, in the same situation. In other words, they had an existing industrial I-1.1 zoning, and they were designated in the official community plan for long-term conversion to commercial uses. Those properties in the subject study area are shown in shade here. Right? So we've got the rental place, the industrial mini mall here, Chevron gas station goes right down to this is
Times Square.
Times Square, yes, and Shannon Place. Surrounding land uses to these, so they're purple. And the surrounding is really a mix. We have residential in here, then we have commercial, multifamily, commercial, and regional district owners. The reason for this is simply to show that the existing industrial zone is quite extensive. It's a very broad zone. There's a couple key areas where it's limited. There's no allowance for assembly centers, and in our zoning bylaw definitions, assembly centers include things like any kind of congregation for fitness clubs, things like that, gas clubs. It also has a limit in terms of offices. So while it allows retail stores, in terms of offices, it limits them to only for industrial or construction business. So, as I noted, the long-term land use is to go to commercial with these properties. And that OC2 designation specifically is intended to accommodate neighborhood restaurants, service stations, retail, office, and service commercial uses that primarily serve the day-to-day convenience needs of local residents. It's not neighborhood commercial. It would be in our categories for the highest level of commercial we anticipate in town. It excludes specifically the big box stores. I'm not looking at regional shopping centers. We met with the affected properties, and at that time we did identify. So this information came to council. The council directed staff to have an initial meeting with the subject properties in terms of to find out where they were at in sort of the development and conversion to commercial, and what their concerns may be. We had that meeting. At that time, we identified 3 options for them to consider in terms of how a rezoning could proceed. One was the current standard one, which is individual owner-initiated rezoning or zoning text amendment. The problem with that one is it is costly for a one-use zoning amendment. And it's time consuming, and a lot of what we understood was property owners are having to respond to inquiries from prospective tenants. And the second that they mentioned the cost and the time, well, that tenant found another location. So it really just kind of stayed in the background and stayed simmering as an issue. Second option is town-initiated concurrent but parcel-specific rezoning. So in other words, we would look at the individual parcels, see what their needs are, and then propose a rezoning. That would allow some properties with existing viable industrial uses to remain unchanged. They wouldn't have to become non-conforming uses like we do the eclectic rezoning, which is the third option. So we outlined those 3 options. And the owners did express, there was acknowledgement of the need of some of the property owners that we need more flexibility in terms of commercial uses and that having that flexibility may reduce vacancies. But there was a very strong concern about negatively impacting existing light industrial users. So there was strong support saying a number of properties, they had viable industrial uses, and they wanted to keep and maintain those at least into the short term. Other concerns that were raised were increased traffic parking and accompanying traffic restrictions, negatively impacting the ability of large transportation vehicles to utilize the area. And that's happening already to a degree as traffic on Guthrie is increasing. There's additional lanes being put in, there's turning restrictions, and in terms of the movement of semi-truck trailers, that's already starting to affect that. And existing shortage of on-street parking already limits existing commercial uses. There's also the inability, there was some concern of the inability of industrial uses to expand if they become non-conforming. So some of them are viable, they would like to have the ability to expand. And definitely concern in terms of differences in the industrial and commercial tax rates. What would happen if they have an industrial use and their zoning is changed to allow more commercial? Does that mean everybody gets jumping taxes? So in regards to the tax question, we were able to clarify with the assessment authority. The zoning generally does not dedicate their land use category. It can influence it. So for example, if it's a vacant piece of property, it's likely they're gonna go with the zoning, the highest and best use under the zoning. If it's an existing building with existing tenants, it's likely then to follow what the actual use is in terms of the categories, the land use categories for taxation. So we did a quick breakdown table in terms of what the existing uses are on the subject properties, whether they've already started transitioning, in our opinion, to commercial uses, whether in our report we're recommending a rezoning. So we would be recommending taking the approach of site-specific, targeting those parcels that are having the issues and leaving the other parcels alone. And then whether or not the owner has provided a preference in regards to the zoning. The result of that is seem a lot easier here. Proposal within your package that we'd like to go back to the public with would be for the 4 properties shown. So we have vet clinic for multi-use with grants flooring. This corner, this one has got a door manufacturing and low unit above. These 2 have definitely expressed interest in proceeding with the zoning amendment. This property was included simply because it is a multi-tenant building, and then it's sandwiched between an existing use that wishes to go and have increased commercial, and an existing commercial residential development. And so what this really shows is, we're trying to show here is not all proposed uses, rather those uses that would either be added to these properties, or would have new allowance, or those existing uses that we propose removal. So we really focus there on the fact of the traffic and the industrial activity in terms of any kind of assembly use would not lend itself well to anything orientated to people under the age of 16. So we propose to create a new land use category of adult fitness studio. Some of the existing uses would be seen more as impractical with mix, close proximities of things like major vehicle repair. Offices, we look at expanding that full out to all offices, so there's no reason to restrict it. That's why this one's taken. And financial institutions, I mean, there are other areas that aren't in flux or in transition that are better suited for things like financial institutions, more of a higher order use that we'd see in the downtown, or encouraging the downtown.
So before we move off that, sorry, why would you leave brew pubs and pubs in there?
The whole movement, the strong movement to sort of that industrial setting where you're manufacturing beer and then consuming on-site or selling on-site. And so sort of to tie into that.
But there's other parcels on, well, there was a brewery on the other site, Shamrock, but they're not changing this.
It would still have that, well, and it also would have that allowance, so, one of the end results, if this proposal were to go ahead, is the new commercial zoning would be extremely broad. It would have all of the most viable, we feel, most attractive industrial and commercial uses. The likelihood of that then shifting over in the long-term to pure commercial is greatly reduced. Given that and the resulting flavor, so very much like Tin Town, right? Granville Island. I mean, Granville Island's now switching over totally to commercial. All the industrials more or less gone, but that took a long time.
Sorry, go ahead.
So when you speak on the adult fitness studios and you say for over the age of 16?
Yeah.
And then I look at other amusement centers, they're going to be under 16, art studios, they could be under 16, billiard hall, they could be under 16, bowling alley. I don't understand the under 16 on the fitness studio.
Artist studio, amusement centers. Amusement centers kind of archaic and tends to, we just kind of left it in there. I don't think anybody's going to do an amusement center anymore, given video gaming. If one would go in, the feeling was it wouldn't necessarily be primarily targeted to people under the age of 16. Much like billiard halls tend to be an older age group. Bowling alleys is quite mixed, and when children come in a lot of times, it's either after normal hours or in the evenings or under adult supervision. That's why that was left in. There is specific things like gymnastics clubs, dance, that may be specifically targeted, their sole operation is for people under 16. That was the big concern. Cars coming at a certain time, a lot of traffic, and then mass discharge of children and being in proximity with heavy equipment. And just the general lack of parking. I mean, we have problems in our school zones. We experience that in terms of our rec center as well. There are peak times, and that's a major parking crunch. Those sites don't really have the ability to have heavy equipment or heavy vehicles leave in a forward motion. They essentially have to go in and back out. There's very little on-street parking. So it was for those reasons.
As long as they don't have Zumba classes, you should be okay. That's one of the busiest parking lot at the rec center is doing Zumba.
You would hope that they would be able to provide vehicles.
You've probably seen that.
How is the Zumba class?
5:30, you cannot park anywhere.
Other issues, related issues that came up, we would like to address as part of this, really is on Anderton and is the existing TELUS exchange building, telephone exchange, which now does a lot of computer communications. It is actually zoned industrial because it's our general zoning category that would allow for public utility use such as that. It has a host of other permitted uses. It's a spot industrial zone surrounded by existing residential with an OCP long-term designation of residential. So there right now is the ability that should that be seen as surplus and marketed, tomorrow a light industrial activity could go on that property. Council would have no discretion in terms of allowing that or not allowing it. So what we're proposing is just a bit of housekeeping there, is to remove the other industrial uses such that it would come before council if they did wish to do another industrial use for rezoning. And it would strongly encourage the conversion of that if it is ever redundant to residential use. It's a further industrial zoning within particular OCP is not designated for that. Industrial fueling installations, that one was just seen as even in the existing I-1.1 areas like Shamrock to be inconsistent in terms of overfacing Guthrie in that area, given traffic levels, given restricted parcel frontages and the turning radiuses needed for that kind of equipment. So we're proposing against a student that we can move that as permitted use. We don't currently have any on those industrial lands, so we would be affecting those current businesses. Historically, pet grooming has always been a nice little issue. We'd like to have cleaned up. It was one of the requested land uses. We don't have a land use category currently that says pet grooming. We more or less have historically allowed it anywhere our zones allow for personal service establishments. We'd just like to clarify that, institutionalize that in the definition.
So that would still be allowed as a home occupation, you're saying?
It's currently not permitted as home occupation.
What is it?
There has been top requests, but the proposed procedures. So we've already had the public, the first consultation event. This is the reporting back to council. So what we're proposing is with this intent to go back out to the affected property owners, and given the stage that we're at, also then open up that meeting to surrounding residents and the town at large. So this is an idea of what is being proposed, present the initiative to them, get feedback on it, report back to council prior to the introduction of the bylaw for first and second reading.
Any questions for Brian? Councilor Fletcher?
So, sorry, just on the pet grooming, so we've taken the pet grooming out of the commercial industrial transition
No.
as an accepted use?
No, the proposal is, right now, we don't have a category that explicitly allows pet grooming. We've always allowed it wherever the zoning allows for personal service establishments, which is typically in our commercial zones. What we're proposing is to amend the definition to include pet grooming, and then that would also be allowed in the new industrial zone. Or the expanded industrial zone.
So you're adding a definition?
Yes. Because really, part of the commercial uses they'd be looking at is also the rest of the personal service establishments like hairdressers and all those kind of items as well.
So is this sort of got initiated by the owner of the Guthrie Trade Center, where a number of people get brought into it in that area? And whose cost is all this rezoning?
The towns.
The town's cost. Yeah.
And has it been triggered? I mean, I'm assuming that there are presently some uses that are not compliant with our zoning. Is that happening?
Yes. We have historically had issues, especially with things like offices. Where people have already established an office, because it's small tenancies that are rented. And either they're getting caught after they get set up, or in the initial stages. And that's part of what we kind of felt the repeated kind of issues coming up showed that it wasn't an area just of non-compliance, but it was more that the area was inefficient.
So given that commercial rental rates are higher, of course assessments will be higher than industrial, there's going to be a benefit to the owners that presumably would be increased use or commercial use, right? I know it's designated in the community plan to get there. So the question, I guess, is that going to price out some of the industrial users? Is that what you're saying, concern? Because they're going to pay a lower rate for renting industrial spaces than they would for commercial?
Per square meter, industrial typically needs more land and can't pay the same per square meter rent charges as commercial. And that was a concern expressed in part of the strong feedback we got back from property owners with existing industrial lands, saying that that's one thing they did not want to occur, and hence the majority of the properties within the area originally targeted are proposed for no change.
So that's why you narrowed it down to those 4 properties, 100 flex on current uses and to still leave sufficient industrial spaces currently being used.
And that's also why we started taking a look at things like financials. Anything that we felt would overly impact adjacent existing industrial uses, because that's where the conflict is going to occur, and they're likely to lose any kind of a conflict with that in terms of public opinion and just daily operations, and also restrictions on their daily operations.
Great.
Yeah, and you're just asking at this point for us a second consultation meeting so you can get more information and more feedback.
Okay, so that's the motion staff are looking for, so we could do that.
I'll move that.
Second.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion's carried. Can somebody find where Councillor Granville?
It's been so long since we've been here, we forgot about it.
Yes.
Yeah, there he was. Yeah. Other side, everyone wants
Alrighty, so we're now to the planning report, PR 14-9, Build Green Training, and this is council to receive that report for information.
Second.
Received that, all those in favor? Motion's carried. Any questions, comments? Councilor Swift?
I have a question. The training module, how long is it? And how do you get certified?
So the training module is several hours long. Certification, you would then be required to register with Build Green itself. I believe it is so the module is really designed to, on its own, to give an overview of the program and an understanding of the program, and see if people are interested. But it sort of takes the rest of their stuff.
And so if they do this, what is it? If they look at the license that we got now for the 6 months, does that count as an equivalency?
We haven't gone in that direction at this time. And what we've advised the design professionals that there's no equivalency. We're looking at either a registered architect or somebody with a demonstrated background in green projects and green architecture and design. So somebody off the top of my head, I would not anticipate that somebody who hadn't been active in that field or in other programs and just took the module without getting certification fees.
Councilor Campbell?
So I knocked on the guy's door the other night and he didn't like our Built Green thing because he said it cost some money to do and blah, blah, blah. But his real issue with it was, he said, the only way to build green, and I'm asking you this question if this is the case, you would end up having to put a heat pump in. It's the only way, because he couldn't hit his target number of 80, I believe. He came to 78 or 79, so in order to get that, you had to put a heat pump in, and he said you're gonna have heat pumps in every house, which is nice, but it's expensive. So I'm asking, is there any A, truth to that, and B, is there flexibility in the plan if we use this model of equivalency? If the guy gets within spitting distance, is that okay, or are we just gonna add the price of a heat pump to an existing house? And this was a question I got asked at the door, so
And to my knowledge, no, a heat pump is not required. What's happened with some of the builders that are experiencing this for the first time, is, even though we had covenants registered on title, they did not take into account the requirements and the options for obtaining it in the design of the buildings. And that's really where this comes in. So then they were trying to retrofit after the fact. And we did grant flexibility and allowances sort of in lieu if you couldn't make the numbers on the idea that the program was in startup. And we'll try to work with the industry. But now everybody knows
providing this training, so it's a matter of designing your building in accordance with this. So it's in it.
He said he hit a 79 and he needed an 80 and then had to go get a heat pump or, I don't know, but that, you know, it seems there should be a little flexibility here.
We did provide flexibility on those existing, I believe they were 4 homes
Yeah.
that triggered this on the existing.
Thank you.
Councilor Marquardt, and then Councilor Rice.
I had the occasion to build a house last year, and I was required by the town to meet Built Green standards or the equivalent, and had to have it certified by an architect. If you just follow the building code, you're almost going to meet Built Green standards. I was required under the covenant that the town put on my property to get Built Green. I needed 90 points. We built it to the code and then put a heat pump in it, and I think without even trying, we achieved 110 points according to Built Green standards. So it's not a,
Yeah.
what's going to be onerous is if you drive up the cost to the builder to get registered and to do all this. The building code takes care of the majority of it. And you know, there's just a few things that aren't included in the building code that I think is just good standards, using low VOC paints and a couple other minor adjustments. But I would hate to see us drive up the cost of a house by making builders get certified and paying $500 a year to build green, and that's my only concern.
Yes, and I mean, in terms of the program and talking to Build Green, they are builders, and this is a builder's program that comes out of the Builders Association. Their real focus is not to add additional costs. It's really to look at things that people are already doing in terms of they're already paying for paint, they're already paying for flooring, and really in terms of it's the selection and the forethought that they're focusing on. They, to their credit, they have been extremely accommodating and aware of our situations and our concerns. I mean, like any kind of program, when they get told that somebody is saying that they have to comply with their standards, they put the effort into, or an equivalency. A lot of times they just don't want to have anything to do with the jurisdiction that says, well, you're just going to undercut me and let somebody else give an equivalency. So in this case, they agreed to the training. They agreed to reduction in the initial costs in terms of certification, and we do have a commitment from them to go to their board in terms of that annual fee. It makes a lot of sense in Alberta where this started, and in the States where they got it from, where you have a building industry much more that, you don't have individual builders or small builders, very much more their industrial scale. You're building 200, 300 units. $500 certification for a development building 300 units is next to nothing. $500 certification annually for a builder who's building 1 unit or 2. Yes. So they have said they're going to bring that forward to their board. Yes, our intent would be, we've identified that as a barrier, and our intent would be to take that covenant and its implementation, if there isn't some kind of changes with Bill Green, to take that and seek alternate means of getting it, so we're not getting the cost. I mean, one of the other things is, can the designers, if there's only 1 or 2 designers that house plans are relatively standard, so can the designer be certified? And that way, that designer is maybe certifying and doing for multiple builders, and that drives the cost down. That's another.
Councilor Price.
Yes, and I'd just like to say, you know, I'm impressed with the work that the planning department has done on this to make it easier for local builders, and the fact that you're actually potentially influencing the large organisation of Built Green to reflect our situation. I think, you know, that looking at an annual membership fee if you're only building a few houses, I think it's too bad that a small community is having an impact on a large organisation. bringing it here in a way that it's much easier and more usable to our community. So just good work. Thank you.
All right, seeing no further questions, we've received this information, and thank you for your report. We do have one more item, Lilia. This is a report on the Regional District OCP bylaw referral. I'm going to get staff to speak to it. I can imagine we've all had a chance to read it at night, so. DAO, perhaps the planner can give us what's going on. Sure.
So just as background, of course, the regional district was mandated to adopt a growth strategy, which they did in 2011. Our OCP was a few months after that, and it is in conformance with the regional growth strategy. We have a very extensive context statement in terms of identifying how it complies or implements the various priorities of the regional growth strategy. And we also have an attachment packet and the required policies in terms of boundary extensions, identifying what areas of the settlement expansion areas the town envisioned coming within municipal boundaries, when and under what conditions. That regional contract statement was received by the board. So there is a requirement to go to the board and for the board to receive that and indicate whether or not they're in agreement. And we did secure that. The regional district is now updating its rural OCP. They are required by statute to conform with the regional growth strategy. So they have a higher standard in terms of not just a regional context statement and how it's consistent with, but they just have the absolute requirement that all their bylaws adopted after regional growth strategy have to be consistent with that strategy. So we apply in this case. Primary area of overlap between the town and the regional district OCP is, of course, in the settlement expansion areas. The settlement expansion areas were specifically designed to identify areas of boundary extension for growth, to handle additional growth, and by identifying these settlement expansion areas and focusing on infill, that is designed to take the pressure off other rural lands, those lands that are in immediate proximity to municipal boundaries. So Chapter 3 lists the settlement expansion areas boundaries in the draft OCP. We get the first and second reading of the regional district. It's really, so it's on the last page that there's concerns that we have raised in regards to those. The first being item 4, the municipality proposing an extension into a settlement expansion area will be encouraged to demonstrate their efforts to intensify within existing boundaries prior to expanding into a settlement expansion area. That's been seen not only as redundant. We have a regional context statement that was referred to the board, was accepted by the board. We have detailed, identified in maps and policies in terms of what's triggering the boundary extensions and when. So that is already there. Also, the very vague nature of the wording is something that we think is going to lead to confusion and a lack of cooperation by saying municipalities proposing to an extension will be encouraged to demonstrate their efforts to intensify. There's no what that is, what is the standard to obtain that or not obtain that, how do you prove it? That's likely to lead to differences in opinion in what is being required or proposed under that policy. And that would likely lead to conflict. And one of the key things in the regional growth strategy is in their policies. It states, boundary extension policies, is the intent of local governments in the Comox Valley that settlement expansion areas as identified on map 5 shall become part of a municipality. Through a boundary extension, local governments will work cooperatively with regard to such boundary extensions and ensure that policies of the RGS are maintained. It's really questionable how you can work cooperatively if you're starting to set up requirements that are very subjective and don't have any qualitative or quantitative requirement, and almost pre-assume that one party is going to renege on their obligations. And that sort of focus and redundancy was also identified in regards to settlement expansion areas policies 5 and 7. Namely, where the province, through statute, through policy, identifies the roles of the regional district and the municipality in boundary extensions. Who does what, who contacts. And these policies duplicate those efforts. And again, we feel that all that can only lead to confusion and misinformation within these areas. Primary and of major importance is an objection to policy number 8. Municipal boundary extensions intended to incorporate lands for greenfield development are discouraged. That staff feel is in direct conflict with the regional growth strategy. The regional growth strategy identifies the settlement expansion areas for accommodation of growth. In regards to existing settlement areas or neighborhoods within that, it identifies and it mentions that the intent is for orderly provision of municipal water and sewer. It makes no mention of whether those areas are designed to accommodate additional growth or targeting those existing neighborhoods. And in contrast, in regards to areas with little or no development, such areas, and I quote, have been identified as reserve areas to help accommodate the long-term growth demands within the Comox Valley. The close proximity to municipal areas means that future growth in these areas will help achieve many of the same benefits as growth within the municipalities, namely developed in a compact form and in an orderly manner that does not attract compact growth of municipal areas that will be efficient use of land. A statement saying that we're supposed to specifically discourage these areas is in conflict with that statement in the regional growth strategy. Also, on a practical note, development within existing neighborhoods is problematic. History has shown that. It's much more controversial, it's much more costly, and unlikely to succeed, as witnessed by recent regional district initiatives in terms of sanitary sewer servicing, where there's even provincial dollars to subsidize the provision of sanitary sewer services. In our case, it's very unlikely to accommodate urban growth on our fringes that the province would again add any kind of dollars to this. So it's really taking away the one viable option, the primary viable option, and the only alternative is existing neighborhoods within the regional district. And that's one area, like for our boundary extensions, while we're proposing in Area A to be in the Butchers Road area, specifically in response to concerns raised by the residents of Croton Beach to avoid any kind of boundary extension or infill. That area was not targeted within the next 20 years for boundary extension.
Just before we take questions, just speak to how we got here and what's happening.
This regional district OCP is, as I understand, is going forward to public hearing on November 3rd. We do not have a council meeting until the 5th scheduled, so which is why I brought this item forward as a late item request council support so that we can have this information included as part of the public hearing submission to them.
And I take it these issues have been highlighted previously by staff to their staff?
There have been staff-to-staff discussions, and concerns have been raised about the inconsistency with what was drafted in the OCP, and the concerns as to how it was applied against the RGS. It appears that those issues haven't been amended for whatever reason, so now we've taken the next step to bring it forward to council. And the initial referral submission that we were given was fairly tight, which is, we expected a longer response time, and we were surprised to hear that it's gone this direction. So that's why we applied.
There's a recommendation before you go ahead.
Well, part of the problem is that yesterday when they brought these amendments to their OCP forward, they said that they have completed the consultation process with all the referral agencies. And both Courtney and our claim is that no, you haven't completed the consultation process, because neither Courtney Council or this council had ever seen or heard any of these issues or these concerns come forward. I spoke to Richard about it, and he said, well, look at the timeline they gave us. You know, they gave it to us in late August and wanted a response by September 19th. And, you know, you're talking about holiday time and long weekends and everything else. There wasn't time for staff to complete a report and get it to us for our comments. And the same thing with the city of Courtney. We asked the area A, B, and C residents yesterday to refer this back until they can get proper consultation from the affected municipalities, namely Courtney and Comox. We're, you know, and especially this item number 8, which is just, I mean, it's incongruent with the RGS. It doesn't, and they just said they didn't care, and just carried on, and they took it the first and second reading, and they want to go to a public hearing. And both Courtney and Comox said, this is just going to look ridiculous, you guys going to a public hearing and municipalities speaking against your amendments. You know, it's just ludicrous. But they wanted to go ahead anyway. So that's why we're dealing with this tonight.
Anybody else on that side of things?
No, so that was my question, is if we pass this, what happens? Do we actually have any power, or can they just ram this through? Because it seems to me like the recommendations that our staff have made here make total sense to me. And as Tom just said, I mean, it would be silly to go with the two municipalities not happening. So have we got any power here at all, or if they just want to continue on, can they just do it? And it's setting up future problems, is all it's really doing, I see.
I'm uncertain as to how the voting at the board works. I think Councillor Grant or Councillor Fletcher can answer that. But I think providing a copy of the staff report that outlines our concerns and the inconsistencies with the regional growth strategies, information that will form part of the public record, will, I believe, be reviewed if necessary in the province.
So there's that. So, and I would assume that Courtney's going to come with the same sort of thought process, or something similar.
Fletcher?
So just for information, yes, the City of Courtney provided a late item letter with their concerns addressed. It was made really clear that the referral process had to go through council. So it was very difficult for myself and Councillor Grant to speak on behalf of council, because council had not considered this. So now we do have this and we're able to speak to it. They are going to public hearing on November 3rd. They may have to, if they consider this more thoroughly, they may have to amend and we'll have to public hearing. And but that in the voting situation, it is strictly the 3 electoral directors.
But even this, for us to get this as a late item, and I'm not criticizing staff here, but even for us to get this in the manner that we have is wrong, because that's not adequate notice for us to even, you know, I mean, we said a 5-minute thing on a fairly important document here, so, you know, even that's not adequate. So you say we've got it now, well, I mean, I'm not criticizing you, I know you're doing it for the right reasons here, but from the regional district point of view, they've gotta give us more notice. That's not
Well,
fair.
and this would only be a recommendation to council.
Yeah.
And again, this was my assumption that we had more time, because
Yeah.
I was planning to have this on the agenda for the fifth November council meeting, but we don't have that much.
Oh, yeah, that's my point, exactly. They're jamming it in too tight, it's not fair to us to do it this way, so.
All right, anything else on this side? No, go ahead, Tom, would you like
I lost my train of thought there. I was actually quite shocked to see the regional district bring this before the committee of the whole yesterday without, the board meeting yesterday, because these exact same concerns were expressed by Courtney at a previous meeting. And I actually thought that they were going to deal with it in a manner that was respectful to the wishes of Courtney. And, and then of course, they bring this before us. So if we approve this staff report today, and this becomes part of the record at the public hearing, then of course, then we can appeal to the ministry if the regional district just goes ahead and passes this bylaw amendment, and it goes to the ministry, then we can express our concern, as will Courtney at that time. So I'm sure that if we make a strong enough case, and Courtney does, that it would behoove them to really sit back and look at this, especially number 8, that is just, as Marvin says, 4, 5, 6, and 7 are redundant. They're already covered. And 8 is against the RGS. It's not what the RGS says. So hopefully sanity will prevail, and and they'll have a second look at this.
Councilor McKinnon?
I assume then that if we vote against this, and when there's an opportunity to speak the reasons why Comox is against it, and including that there's not been enough time to consider, rather than just a no, and then there needs to be some explanation.
Well, this motion, which is the planner's recommendation, would be that we not recommend approval by the town of Comox for reasons presented in the report. That would unfortunately only be a committee of the whole recommendation, which would go to November 5th. But I assume we could send them at least a copy of what we're proposing.
So to be clear, we have to vote yes or say no.
The recommendation would have to be passed.
Just want to be clear.
We're not recommending approval for these reasons. Okay, anything further? So,
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Further discussion?
Just before we move on, have we sent any common things in the past from the
Yes.
planning
I
department?
think the staff,
There have been discussions, verbal discussions, because again, capacity within Marvin's department as well. There have been discussions over the phone with staff there to date, indicating, some general acceptance with things, as well as concerns raised about some specifics.
Because we don't usually approve or disapprove referrals. Is it because it's on the official community plan that it's before us? We don't know.
Well, there's been I think a change in the referral process. This was not referred to council, this was referred to the town. And we've done that on an organizational basis with each other, that we do refer those items at a staff level. If we believe they need to be elevated to the council table, we do that. Again, in this situation, we just didn't have the time to address that.
yeah, so the trick we have on this one, of course, is that in our council policy manual, hereby our deputy clerk, that all recommendations made by committees must be submitted to approve by council prior to any action being taken to implement the contents of those minutes. So unless council has by resolution given the committee the power to act, so we're kind of stuck with the timing issue here. We'll have a committee of the whole. We won't by November 3rd, obviously, be able to make a submission, because we won't have a council meeting.
We can have a special meeting with council.
I was just gonna say, why don't we just pass this and then call a special meeting and do it right now.
We have to do it 24 hours.
We could do something next Wednesday, perhaps.
We don't have a meeting scheduled for next Wednesday, but we could.
Sure, okay, so, well, let's, we have passed this motion. All those in favor? Motion's carried. And,
Do you need a motion for a special council meeting next Wednesday?
yes,
Okay, so I'll make a motion for a special council meeting next Wednesday at 4:15, does that work?
We want to do 5:30.
just checking this out.
It's just gonna be one.
Yeah, it'd be better for me,
Five, good for everybody? At 5:30.
yeah. Second for that then?
Second.
All those in favor? Motion's carried. There we go, without we having that off.
Well, it'll be a very quick, could be a record-breaking meeting.
I mean, it's unfortunate, it's had to come to this point. I mean, I can't for the life of me see why at yesterday's meeting they didn't.
Well, what's the rush?
In any event, we'll see you next week on that issue. Thank you, Deputy Clerk. So no other items coming forward for the meeting, a motion to adjourn would be in order. Favor, motion